I think there's a difference in teaching or coaching beginners who are young versus beginners who are, maybe in the high school age. So if you're working with beginners, when most players start to play basketball somewhere in the 6 to 10 year old range, versus those as they enter high school. So at some high schools, whether because of the population in the high school or the lack of students in the high school, it is possible that you get nearly pure beginners playing basketball for the first time as they enter a high school team. Whereas in a lot of communities, most players that are playing by the high school level have been playing for a period of years, and their beginning years were, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there. And one of the biggest differences between the two groups is the social factor. So if you're working with beginners who are 7, 8, 9 years old, there's usually not the same type of fear because they play games in front of just their parents and really nobody else. Their friends are generally either on the team or they're not coming to games. And so the environment in which they're learning skills and then performing those skills is different. When you're working with a high school athlete who's a beginner, their friends are there. Their social group is at games, is walking through the gym during practices, is more there, is more around. The boy that a girl's flirting with is there for a game, or vice versa. The girl that the boy is flirting with is there, at the game, at the beginning of the year. And so there is a much bigger fear of mistakes and of failure because of that social factor. And when we're thinking about how we teach players, regardless of whether they're beginners, intermediate, advanced, so on and so forth, we can't underestimate the social factor and how that affects learning. And so the presence of friends, whether on the team or just around the team, the presence of parents at games, the presence of parents at practices, all these different environments can affect the social nature of learning. And so in some cases, parents being at practice can be a big distraction to a young child because they pay more attention to their parent than they do to their coach. And so that can become a distraction. Maybe in some parent-child relationships, there can be a bigger pressure, whether perceived or explicit, to succeed, and therefore having that parent there during games or during practices may change the social effect for that child and make that learning more difficult when that parent is there. And it could be in the same way with a parent as it is for an older child with their friends or their peer group being there, and that affecting their ability to learn, their ability to pay attention, their ability to concentrate. And so I think as you work with different age groups, there are different needs, even if those age groups, you have beginners, of different ages, they're going to need different things and they're going to behave differently because of where they are in terms of, their social development, not to mention their biological development, so on and so forth. And so I think as coaches, we need to understand the social environment in which we coach and be cognizant of how our players are reacting to that social environment and what we can do to mitigate the distractions or negative effects towards learning, whether that's a parent or whether that's a peer group, and try to put players in the best place where they can learn. One thing I think with older players who are beginners, so let's say a high school freshman who's a beginner but playing high school basketball, it might be more necessary for that player to see immediate success in a skill than with a younger player. Younger players, you typically can tolerate mistakes because they associate success with effort. So young children, especially the 6, 7, 8, 9s, they've been conditioned that effort is success. So you try hard, and that's the goal. That's what we're trying to do here. And so if they miss a shot or if they dribble the ball off their foot or stuff like that, they're less affected by that mistake. Whereas by the time you reach the high school age, you're very aware of what a mistake is, and oftentimes the high school athletes then whether beginner or not, will put out less effort because they have that fear of failure, they have that fixed mindset type. And so they don't want to show that they care if they're not very good. And putting out a lot of effort shows that they care, and if they're a beginner, they're probably not very good. And so having some immediate success with a beginner at that older age group is probably more important than having the immediate success with a younger age group, because they need to start to build some confidence, both for themselves, but also because they're going to be performing in front of their peer group more than likely. I mean, I remember when I played sports when I was young, I never had friends that weren't on my team that came to a game. You know, the girl that I liked in class never came to any of my games in, grade school or below. You know, really the only people at our games were parents, and siblings of my teammates. Whereas in high school now, our games, we had some of our peer group, and boys and girls from our peer group would come, and we'd be playing in front of girls that we liked, or guys that we were friends with, and football players that were the cool kids in class that we were trying to be friends with, and so on and so forth. And so there was that social factor, whereas there were never other people at games. Nobody really cared about who won our youth games. It wasn't important, so on and so forth. When I was in elementary school, they never announced our victories or our losses over the loudspeaker in school, but a lot of high schools will do that. They'll, at the beginning of school, they'll announce, hey, the boys basketball team won yesterday, good job. Or the girls basketball team, won yesterday, good job. And so it's much more part of the school, part of the environment, part of the social experience, and that does affect the way that athletes learn, because it creates a much bigger fear of looking bad in front of peers. And for high school students, that becomes one of their major motivating factors, is not looking bad in front of their peers or in front of friends, trying to impress friends, trying to impress peer groups. And so trying to give those athletes something that they can be good at initially, almost immediately, is probably much more important with that older age group, especially with beginners of an older age group, than with the younger age group, who typically is much more resilient to mistakes and associates success with effort.